All right, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society for this evening, May 17th. We're doing it on a Wednesday today in 2023. We have the last of our Willie Mays, the month of May's entries tonight with Duke Goldman and Mark Simon. Both will be discussing the pieces they contributed to Willie Mays' 5 Tools. This is a Sabre publication, worth having. Excellent, excellent read. As far as note keeping is going, there is no meeting next week due to Memorial Day. After that, we have 4 meetings in June, 3 in July, 3 in August, and 2 in September. I will get out to you the save the date reminders probably over the weekend. If not early next week, since there won't be a meeting. But as far as tonight goes, we're going to start with Mark Simon. Mark is going to talk about Willie's defensive prowess. And then Duke is going to be speaking of MONTE, IRVIN, and Willie Mays being roommates. So, gentlemen, welcome to the New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for this evening. And I guess, Mark, you're going to be leadoff. So, batter up.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Mark Simon. I'm sorry that my camera is not working at the moment, having an issue with my work laptop that would have allowed it to work, but not the case. So anyway, I live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I'm a writer and researcher. I work for a sports analytics company, but I think the things that will interest you the most are that I'm the son of a New York Giants fan who grew up in the Bronx in the 1940s and the 1950s. If you still follow the Giants, you might hear John Miller and Dave Fleming say my name every so often. I'm their unofficial statistician, and I appear on Marty Laurie's radio show each week, every Saturday. And I like to write about defense. So I was one of many contributors to the new Sabre book, Willie Mays' 5 Tools, which he just put up on the screen. Society for Baseball Research just released it a few weeks ago. The book contains more than 60 articles about Mays, covering every aspect of his life and career, including all of his most memorable games. It was edited by Bill Nolan and a group of volunteers that do wonderful work, far beyond anything that I could do. And I wrote one essay, Duke wrote another. That's what we'll be talking about. The essay that I wrote was called The Defensive Excellence of Willie Mays, and I have a slideshow that if you let me share my screen, I can show some pictures that will kind of help tell the story.
Mark, the screen is yours. If you have trouble showing it, you'll let me know. I have your email.
Sure. View slideshow. There we go. That's the cover of the book. All right, let's start here. So a few stats to start us off, because I'm a stat guy. Willie Mays, more than 7,000 career putouts. 7,000. That's the most by a center fielder and the most by any outfielder since 1901. He's the 7th all time in assists by a center fielder. He has 12 Gold Glove awards, tied with Roberto Clemente for the most. You probably know all of these things already.
No, I don't know him. Keep on going. Yep.
Willie Mays would use a 12-inch glove, and he would make it 14 inches because he would pull his palm out of his glove. That allowed him to have greater extension, although not necessarily as great as the huge glove that you're looking at in this photo. So you all know this one. This is what I did for the article was I tried to find as many Willie Mays amazing defensive plays as I could. I went through newspaper articles, I went through books, I went through magazines, I went through Bill Klink, who I see here. I went through internet message boards, photo libraries, and other Sabre members to help put together the list. I ended up with a lot more than 24, but I just decided to go with 24 to keep it to Mays' number and to have as diverse a list as I can. The list started with Willie as a 17-year-old for the Birmingham Black Barons, and it ends with an old timers day for them in 1981. So anyway, you know this photo. It's one of the most famous catches of all time. It's Willie Mays making his catch in the 1954 World Series against Vic Wertz of Cleveland. A catch that basically saved the game, because if he doesn't make this catch and throw the ball back in the way that he did, a couple more runs score, Vic Wertz would have been 4 for 4 that day and been the hero of game 1. Instead, Dusty Rhodes hits the home run. The game goes the other way. But the Willie Mays Vic Wertz story continues into 1956, and there is a reference online to a catch that Willie Mays made in spring training against Vic Wertz in the 5th inning of a game in Tucson, Arizona. Willie ran after it just the same, wrote the writer for the New York Daily News. He kept running and running and snagged it with one hand 400 feet in right center. He used the other hand to back himself away from the wall. And I'm sure by that point, Vic Wertz, spring training or not, was tired of Willie Mays. So here's a picture of Willie Mays, a post shot from when Mays was in the Army in 1953. There's an article online, and a lot of what I did was just find things that were already online and kind of bring them together under one roof. So for this one, Willie Mays, while serving in the Army, played for Fort Eustis of Virginia and regularly wowed his fellow soldiers, some of who you can see here. A man named Jim Shoup told of a play that Mays made against him when Shoup, who was playing for Patuxent River Naval Air Station, tried to go first to third on a single. Mays had darted to his left, completely eliminating the gap. He snared the liner on one hop, pivoted smartly, and unleashed a bullet of a throw to third base, wrote Jim's son, Tom. As Dad chugged along, the third baseman caught Mays' perfect throw and waited patiently for him to arrive. Dad executed a textbook slide right into the tag. This is a picture from the 1959 season. It's from the 1959 pennant race. That, really, even though there was a playoff that did not involve the Giants were still involved all the way down to the final weeks of the season. Mays hit .488 in the last 12 games of the year, and he made this catch. This is a leaping catch against Eddie Matthews, Hall of Famer, in right center field against Milwaukee in a game that, unfortunately, the Giants lost. Willie came down in a heap, clutching his sore shoulder, wrote the writer Curly Grieve in the San Francisco Examiner. But after resting on his knees momentarily, he got up and trotted to the dugout. The picture, as you can see here, captures Mays in mid-jump, and the photo caption, and you have to look really closely for this, I even have a hard time seeing it. The photo caption notes that there's a boy in the kind of the far right of the photo who was more interested in his bag of peanuts than he was in the play. Now, Mays made this catch 3 days after suffering a bruised thigh after trying to catch a ball hit by Harry Anderson of the Phillies. He recovered, made a catch later in that inning, and then he made this catch 3 days later against Eddie Matthews. This one you've probably seen video of. It's from the 1970 season. It is a crash between Willie Mays and Bobby Bonds that was featured prominently in the HBO documentary where they talked to Barry Bonds about this play because Barry was there. I also talked to Johnny Bench about this play, the one player that I did get to talk to in trying to write this whole thing up. Johnny Bench said it was one of the most amazing things that he ever saw. It's Mays and Bonds coming together on a fly ball hit by Bobby Tolan. The only question was how I would catch the ball, said Willie. And Willie then fell on top of Bonds after making the catch. And on his way down, he took a shot from Bonds' knee. Mays held the ball even as he was knocked out. And there was a 5-minute delay to allow both players to recuperate. Barry Bonds said to Bobby Bonds, "I don't like you anymore. You hurt Willie." Because Barry Bonds' favorite player was Willie Mays. A lot is made of how Willie Mays, at the end of his career, was falling over himself in the outfield trying to make plays. And to some extent, that is overblown. This is a catch that he made to rob Darrell Evans of a home run in 1973. Came in a game against the Atlanta Braves, 410 feet to center field. Mays got all the way back, was able to jump and make the catch at the fence. And then this one, and it's kind of hard to see. It's kind of blurry. You can find it actually on Twitter. And Gary, I can send you the link if you want to pass it along to people, but it is kind of blurry. It's a Ron Swoboda fly ball to left center field in a Mets Old Timers game that was played on October 3rd, 1981, the 30th anniversary of Bobby Thompson. They invited old Giants and old Dodgers, and Willie Mays, age 50, made a running catch on the warning track in left center field and fell over to take away a hit from Swoboda. Ron Swoboda doesn't remember the play now, but I can assure him that it happened because there's video proof. As Jack Lang wrote, it was a play that many modern major leaguers half his age would not make. So I know you're going to ask, and I don't have a photo for this one, I know you're going to ask what was Willie Mays' favorite play. And you can read a lot of accounts that it was this catch or that catch. He usually says April 18th, 1952, which is the 7th inning of a game against the Dodgers, when he caught Bobby Morgan's line drive with a dive and a slide near the fence in left center field. I didn't think I had a chance at it. It was sinking fast and seemed to be curving away, but I stayed with it and got it on the dive. Mays noted that he knocked himself out as he hit the wall, and when he came to, there were two people standing over him. Leo DeRocher, who wanted to make sure that Mays was okay, and Jackie Robinson, who wanted to see that he actually caught the ball. So just to close, what's amazing is that if you go through articles, and I went through a lot of articles, and I went through message boards and all these different places, everyone says this was his best. Branch Rickey saw one and said, this is the finest catch I ever saw and the finest catch I ever will see. Tommy Henrik saw a catch that Mays made on Clemente that he said, that was impossible. There's a catch that he made in 1957 that my dad still talks about to this day. I think it was against the Pittsburgh Pirates. There was a catch in 1963 that the San Francisco newspapers described as impossible, except for Willie Mays. And he also had a game in which he had 3 assists, which is pretty remarkable for an outfielder. He always says that he should have had 4 that day, but the second baseman dropped the throw on one of his other plays. No one had more amazing plays than Willie Mays. I think that's my biggest takeaway. I hope you'll buy the book, check the book out. It's available in paperback and as a PDF. Special thanks to John Shea, Eduardo Perez, who connected me with Johnny Bench, Gary Mintz, and the members of the Preservation Society, and Bill Klink for their assistance with this project. And with that, you can unshare me, and or I can unshare myself. There we go.
There you go. Mark, thank you so much. That was great. We're going to come back to you.
Sure.
And Duke is done, and we'll have questions for both of you. So everybody should hold their questions until the second presentation is completed. Mark, again, thank you. And without further ado, Duke, you are up. Duke, unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daron Goldman. That's why you see Daron on my box, but I'm known as Duke. Not, by the way, after Duke Snyder, indirectly after John Wayne, but that's a long story for another day. But I do use the name Duke, and I'm a longtime member of SABR, and I do a monthly radio segment on local radio up here in Northampton, WHMP, and it's called Talking Baseball with the Duke. And we play the Talking Baseball song, which ends, of course, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. So, you know, hearkening back to the great times of the 50s. Now, I'm not quite that old. I'm 61, so I don't remember that period of time. I'm from the Bronx, and now I live in Western Massachusetts. But up here, it's very popular that I can say to people, I'm from the Bronx, but I hate the Yankees. And why do I hate the Yankees? Well, because when I was 7 years old, the 1969 Miracle Mets won the World Series. And before I even really knew what baseball was, I knew that the Mets were amazing. So I am a Mets fan, a Red Sox fan, as I live in New England, and I root for every team who's playing the Yankees. So how did I get to writing about Willie and Monte? Well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll cut to the chase. I became interested in Black baseball and particularly the Negro Leagues about 10 years ago and joined SABR's Negro Leagues committee. And so I had written a number of articles about the Negro Leagues and the process of baseball integration. And, you know, like any longtime baseball fan, I knew a great deal about Monte Irvin, knew that he'd had a fabulous but kind of truncated career, didn't quite get to do in the major leagues what he did in the Negro Leagues. And I became very intrigued about him. And luckily I had a contact who put me in touch with him. So I interviewed him on the phone. And then I was lucky enough to meet him in Houston in 2014 and spent a wonderful hour with him. After that, I became more and more interested in different aspects of his career and decided I would like to write a book on his life. As I'm sure most, if not all of you know, Monte Irvin wrote his own book, a book called Nice Guys Finish First, and we all know what that was a response to, right? It was a response to Leo DeRocher having his autobiography, Nice Guys Finish Last. So Monte was the nice guy. And for all of you who've known Monte, met Monte, and everybody I've ever read who's interacted with him, he was just such a superhuman being. I've not come across anybody who had anything negative to say about him. So I have a contract to write a biography of Monte Irvin. It's going to be called Monte Was There, The Historic Impact of Monte Irvin, because he was at so many critical events in baseball history in various and sundry roles. In working on this book, I've started out by writing articles. And the first two articles I wrote were about Monte and another player. And last year there was a book, Arriba, that came out that SABR put out, and it was about Roberto Clemente. And Monte was in Puerto Rico. He played in the Puerto Rican Winter League. And at age 12, Monte was Roberto Clemente's idol. And later in 1973, when tragically, after Roberto had died December 31st, 1972, and he got picked immediately to be in the Hall of Fame, he entered the Hall of Fame with Monte Irvin, who was also inducted in 1973. So this year, SABR decided that they were going to do a book on Willie Mays. And I thought, well, it would be great to write about the relationship of Willie Mays and Monte Irvin. And I'd already read a lot of different books, Willie Mays biographies, Monte's biography, all sorts of articles. And I think I knew the basics of what their relationship was about, but doing more research into it exposed me to a few other sources, newspaper sources, and particularly a book called Born to Play Ball, which came out in 1955. And it was Willie Mays' first as told to book. I don't know how many of you have seen this book. I didn't have a copy myself. I found it at the library. And it was very instructive to me, particularly about Willie and Monte and their interactions and Monte's influence. So I'll read to you the beginning of my article entitled ROOMIE, The Relationship Willie Mays and Monte Irvin Shared. And this is a quote from that book. ROOMIE, that's Monte Irvin. He and I roomed together when the ball club's on the road. Many's the time I hollered for him to get me out of what I'm in. Like the time we were posing for the team picture and a guy came up to me and said, quote, Willie, I'm Jumble from the Daily Mumble, and wanted me to predict the outcome of the World Series. Well, Mr. Jumble from the Daily Mumble said, haven't you any idea how the series is going to go? Yes, I said, I got an idea. First two games be played at the Polo Grounds. Then we go to Cleveland. All right, he said. Then how would you compare your outfield with theirs? ROOMIE, I yelled out, come over and take care of this man. So Willie was describing how even still in 1954, he turned to Monte to troubleshoot for him. Monte was one of his main guys, somebody that could help him handle things as a young player. Now, I was speaking to one of your fellow members, Gary Brown, today, and Gary was saying that, Leo DeRocher was kind of the father figure for Willie, and Monte was more like the older brother. And I've read in various sources that Monte said and others said that in the first year or so, Willie turned to Monte for advice. And by the next year, everybody was turning to Willie. But note that this book was written in 1955. This story that I just read to you was written about the 1954 series. It was still the case, even in 1954, Willie was still 23 years old, and Monte at that point was 35, 12 years older than Willie. Monte was a wise head, somebody who was very low key, who was knowledgeable, who knew how to handle situations. And Willie felt like, Monte had his back. But of course, Monte felt that Willie had a tremendous impact on the Giants. But what I want to start out talking about, and I'm going to try to hit a few highlights of their relationship. All you guys know so much about what they did on the field. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is more how they interacted, how they met, what circumstances they were in together. So one of the things I had read in Monte's autobiography, that he first met Willie in 1951, the day that Willie debuted for the Giants, playing against the Philadelphia Phillies on April 25th in Philadelphia. But clearly that's not really accurate. I don't know if Monte had forgotten or he just really considered that they got to know each other when they met and talked, because 3 years before that, they were almost certainly on the field together on April 19th, 1948 in Macon, Georgia. And this was actually when Willie was playing for the Negro Southern League, NSL, which was then a Black minor league, Chattanooga Choo-Choos. He played for them before he played for the Birmingham Black Barons. And in the April 20th Chattanooga Daily News, there was a report of a game between the Choo-Choos and the Newark Eagles. And at the age, Willie, remember, was still 16 years old at that point, not turning 17 till May 6th. Willie was mentioned in that article as the, quote, the hitting and fielding star for the Chattanooga team. So here's Willie at 16 years old, already starring, and he's playing a game against the Newark Eagles. Now, I was not able to find any box score for that game, so I don't know for sure if Monte appeared in that game, but he was with the Newark Eagles in 1948. There's every reason to think that Monte was there and probably even playing in that game. They played against each other again in July, 3 months later. On July 25th, 1948, Willie was now with the Birmingham Black Barons. And by the way, I'm wearing a Birmingham Black Barons hat that I got last summer at the Jerry Malloy conference of the Negro League Committee of SABR. We had our conference last year in Birmingham, and we all went to see Rickwood Field, where Willie starred, which is still being used today. So Willie played for the Barons again against the Newark Eagles. And this time there is a box score. And Willie went 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs. Monte Irvin was 4 for 5 with 3 RBIs. So they played against each other in that game. And I would think they must have been at least somewhat aware of each other, that they were on the same field. And there are reports that in the off seasons of 1949 and 1950, they played against each other on barnstorming teams. So they had exposure to each other before 1951. But the famous moment where they really started to get to know each other was April 25th, 1951. Willie, after his 477, rocket-powered start with Minneapolis Millers, comes up, goes through New York, takes the train down to Philadelphia, and he's sent off to his hotel room. And who is his roommate? Monte Irvin. And so in that first game, as I'm sure most of you know, Willie went 0 for 5. And in fact, Willie and Monte had an encounter in the field. Now, it's been described differently by different sources. The Sporting News said they almost collided. Other sources said they actually collided in the outfield, or when Willie ran up Monte's back. Either way, they almost at least ran into each other. Willie went 0 for 5. The Giants won the game nonetheless. And Willie, of course, started at 0 for 12, getting his first hit against Warren Spahn. And Willie, as we all know, was kind of uptight at the beginning. In fact, told Leo DeRocher after he was 1 for 26, saying, I can't play here. And Leo, of course, famously said, you're my center field. But apparently also Willie, not surprisingly, turned to Monte. And after the 0 for 12, apparently Willie spoke to Monte and said, I can't do it here. And Monte said, well, something to the effect of, well, you know what, as long as you don't hit, we're going to keep winning. Because look, you went 0 for 12 and we won the first 3 games. So Monte was already there trying to help Willie through a difficult adjustment period as a guy who was, barely 20 years old at this point, or not even 20 years old when they first spoke. What impact did Willie have on the team and Monte on Willie? Well, Monte said, and I believe it was in his autobiography, when Willie arrived, everybody saw right away what a sensational young budding star he was, right? But we all know that Willie's first season, it was very good. He had 20 homers, 68 RBIs, hit 274, rookie of the year, excellent performance, but nowhere near as great as he became, right? And clearly, I think most people would say Monte was the MVP of that team, leading the National League in RBIs, came in 3rd in the MVP voting. But Willie, according to Monte and so many of his teammates, was the galvanizing force and the life of the team. And according to Monte, Willie's effect on the Giants was, quote, Willie joined the club and it was instantly improved at 4 positions, right? And we all know that Monte moved from first base to left field. Whitey Lockman moved to first base. Willie took over center field. And eventually, Bobby Thompson ended up at 3rd base. Now, by the way, some of this got put into motion a few days before Willie joined the team. So Monte moved from first base. He was not a good first baseman. Monte was a great defensive player, very good, but first base was not his position. He moved to left field first on May 21st, 4 days before Willie debuted with the Giants. And then on Willie's debut, Monte played right field that day. Leo, being the gambler, the strategist that he was moving players around. And even after that, Monte didn't always play left field. He switched around a bit. Sometime in the middle of the summer, he took over left field and stayed there for good. Willie was definitely an important force on a team that Monte always described as not as good as the Brooklyn Dodgers. And when we look at it now, we can see that as far as Hall of Fame players are concerned, we have Monte Irvin and Willie Mays, but Brooklyn Dodgers, now that Gil Hodges has been inducted into the Hall of Fame, had 5 position players on the 1951 team that got into the Hall of Fame. But Monte said that the Giants were more of a together team than the Dodgers were, and that Willie was the glue that brought the team together. And Willie was this exuberant guy, especially as a young player. So another quote that I came across from Born to Play Ball, Willie described the last play of the 1951 season, not a remarkable play by any means. Monte caught the last ball that ended the game so that the Giants beat Boston Braves and were now in the playoff. And he caught the ball off Sid Gordon of the Boston Braves. And as Willie described it in his book, I went over as fast as my legs could go. Monte was there waiting. I shouted at him. He patted his glove a couple of times. I shouted some more. Then Monte made the catch. I jumped out on him out of just plain joy. So this was the exuberance that Willie demonstrated on the field. Now, I'll talk a little bit more afterwards about how Monte was there in so many instances in Willie's life, and many times when it really counted, it was important. And Willie also was there for Monte. But they did have, in many instances, a rather playful relationship too. And this I read about reading newspaper articles talking about the two of them in the early to mid 50s. And by the way, Willie and Monte, Monte was as far as I know, the only roommate that Willie ever had in baseball. Once Monte was let go by the Giants in '55, Willie roomed by himself. The only possibility where Willie might have roomed with someone else on the road would have been early '52 when Monte had broken his ankle and didn't start the season with the Giants before Willie went off to the military. So in some of these articles, they talked about games that Monte and Willie would play together. And they famously played pepper games with Leo DeRocher, betting over who would catch the ball that Leo would hit, and how many Cokes they'd win. But also they played a game called distance, which they played in batting practice. Whoever hits the ball farthest in batting practice wins all the pop they can drink. But the rule was you have to drink it all in the clubhouse. Another game that Willie and Monte played together, they called Captain of the Room, which meant that whoever got the most hits that day in a game, they basically became the other player's servant, which meant, you know, when they wanted to get a newspaper, the other player, the one who got the least hits, had to pick up the newspaper, had to pick up the phone, etc. So there was a playful side to their relationship. And it's also been reported that Willie really, when Monte was in a less of a good mood, Willie could cheer him up. Willie was always playing their portable record player and bringing things alive. And this is what we all know Willie was, not just an outstanding player, but an outstanding teammate, a beloved teammate. But most importantly, Monte was there for Willie when it counted. So there was an incident in a Las Vegas casino in 1954. The Giants were playing the Cleveland Indians regularly in spring training, but they went off to Las Vegas. In fact, I think there was a game in Las Vegas. And Roger Kahn, the great sports writer, recounted this story many years later in some of his memoirs. And Willie was in a casino. He was hanging out, not even playing, around a gaming table. And Roger Kahn was there as well, standing next to Willie. And a guy who worked at the casino pulled Roger Kahn over and said, basically, what's that guy doing over there? Who is he? And Roger Kahn said, well, that's Willie Mays. And that guy said, I don't care, and used the famous ugly epithet to say, we don't allow these people to be anywhere near the tables. And Roger Kahn went ballistic. And he told the whole story of his encounter with these casino operators. And he ended up by saying, I'm going to report this in the newspaper. Well, Monte Irvin was nearby. Monte got brought in, and Monte took Roger Kahn aside, as Roger reported many years later, and said, you know what? Really, I would appreciate if you don't print this, not now, because Willie's 23 years old. He's just getting established. You know, at this point, he'd been away in the military for over a year, just coming back to spring training, not yet the Willie Mays superstar that we all got to know. He said, it would be better for Willie. He's not up for dealing with this. And also, Monte took Willie to the airport bus. They were going to fly out to Los Angeles afterwards, and counseled him and calmed him down. Kahn did not tell this story until the 1970s. In addition to Monte counseling Willie when he was slumping at the beginning of '51, Willie reported that Monte would invite Willie over for dinner to his house in New Jersey to have dinner with Monte and his family, with his wife Dee, and that Monte took walks with him. And Willie said, quote, he made sure that I didn't go into the wrong crowd. He was my mentor and made me aware of what I could do and what I couldn't do. So Monte was advising Willie in various ways, also on the field. Again, Willie reported in the book Born to Play Ball that, you know, we all know Willie had an amazing throwing arm, but that Monte contributed to that Monte advised Willie to throw by aiming at the cutoff man rather than all the way home. And according to Willie, the result was then this amazing throw that I'm sure you all know about, the throw that Willie made to nail Billy Cox at the plate in 1951 on a fly ball by Ferrillo. Also, Willie studied how Monte stole home. Monte stole home 5 times in the 1951 season, and Monte told him, in some ways, although you wouldn't think it would be the case, it was easier to steal home against a lefty catcher, with a lefty batter up. And Willie talked about how much he learned from Monte, learned about the hitters, learned about approach. But also Monte took him to the night spots. Monte took Willie to Toots Shore. He took him to the Harlem spots like Small's Paradise and Red Rooster. And as Willie reported, Monte always made sure that Willie had waiting for him when he came to these places, a Coke with a cherry in it, because as you know, Willie was not a drinker. Also, Monte was there throughout Willie's life. Not only was he his roommate, Monte was in left field next to Willie when the catch was made. And as Monte reported, they were running off the field together, and Willie told Monte on the way back to the bench that he had the ball all the way. Monte showed up when Willie was honored throughout Willie's career and afterwards at the Hall of Fame, at an event honoring the Polo Grounds not long before that in 1979, at a day that was held by the Mets in 1963. He saw Willie's 3,000th hit. He saw Willie's last at bat in the World Series. And Willie was there when Monte had probably the singular event that changed the course of his career. In fact, Willie contributed when Monte broke his ankle on a slide in 1952 in an exhibition game on Willie's base hit. Monte slid into third base, had a terrible break of his ankle, and as has been reported, Willie cried. He was so upset. Well, in his autobiography, Monte said Willie was crying really because he saw the postseason money flying out the window. But I don't think that was really true. For one thing, Willie already knew at that point he was going to the military. And for another thing, Monte and Willie was still 20 years old. Willie saw this grotesque injury, which was so upsetting. A lot of people at the time said it was hard to look at, and he knew it happened on his hit. And I'm sure he had some sense that this was going to be a bad thing for Monte, and it was. Monte missed most of the 1952 season, came back in 1953, had a really good comeback year, one that's not talked about in the same vein as his wonderful season in 51. But Monte also re-injured that same ankle late in 1953, and he was never quite the same after that. I recently started to speculate, and we know that Monte ended up going to the Chicago Cubs in 56. He very briefly played in 57 for 4 games with the Los Angeles Pacific Coast League team, and then had to retire. But would it have been possible for Monte still to have been with the Giants in 1958? I think if Monte didn't break his ankle like that, he might well still, even as a 39-year-old, have been there. And we all know that Willie had some adjustment problems moving to San Francisco. He was not the man anymore. He dealt with racism and trying to buy a house. The fans there celebrated their guy, Orlando Cepeda. If Monte had been there, I think he would have made it easier for Willie, because that's the kind of impact that Monte could have on Willie. Monte also said at one point, the 2 greatest guys I ever met in baseball are Willie Mays and Ernie Banks. They are joys to be with. So, clearly Willie was very high in Monte's estimation. And the opposite is also true. In Monte's book, in Willie's book 24, his 5th chapter is entitled Honor Your Mentors, the story of Leo DeRocher and Monte Irvin. So I was surprised when I watched the Willie Mays documentary late last year, and I know you had the I think it was John Shea and Nelson George on one of your Zooms. I watched part of it, and they talked about Willie's influences, and they talked about Piper Davis and Willie's dad, Kitty Cat, and they talked about Leo, and they didn't mention Monte at all. And I was astonished that that wasn't in that documentary. And speaking to Gary Mintz in recent days, I didn't see the whole Zoom. Apparently, somebody said, well, we thought we were going to have a much longer documentary. Monte ended up on the cutting room floor because we could only do an hour. Well, that's not good enough for me. I think if there was a 15-minute documentary on Willie, that Monte still should have appeared. Monte was such an important influence on Willie's life, his career. They were lifelong friends. And to my mind, the best testament to how important Monte was comes from none other than Leo DeRocher. Now, we all know Leo was kind of a self-promoter, right? Leo liked to be the center of attention, but Leo was also at this event in 1979, honoring the Polo Grounds, and Leo was quoted as saying, "Monte Irvin has as much to do with Willie's success as I did." And Willie said at the memorial for Monte Irvin after Monte died in 2016, a memorial that Willie apparently was too upset to attend, he said, "Monte was wise and generous and tough as they come. He was all the things that you have heard and then some. There will never be another Monte Irvin." That's what I got for you guys today.
Duke,
Thanks for having me.
Duke, that was great. Mark, that was great. And again, you find both of their contributions in this book. I'm going to ask a few questions, and we're going to open it up for anybody. You could ask both of them a question, one a question, whatever you want. Mark, you know, I know what I viewed as his Mays' greatest catch. What's your thinking on that?
So I feel like I'm almost too young and too unqualified to do that. I'm only 48, and I obviously wouldn't have seen any of them in person. So I'm good with going with the one that he thinks was the best, the one from 1952 against the Dodgers and Bobby Morgan. I do want to add one anecdote, if I can, because it was mentioned the 1951 play, which is prominently mentioned in my article. Where he threw a runner out at the plate. He threw out Billy Cox at the plate. One of the really cool things about that was August 15th, 1951. And I'm guessing that this has been brought up before, but in case it hasn't, in the New York Daily News the next day, the lead of the story summarizing the game was, "Now that it doesn't matter too much anymore, the Giants have discovered that they can beat the Dodgers if they make an all-out try." And I just love that it was phrased as it doesn't matter too much anymore, because the writer didn't know at the time that they were in the middle of a 16-game winning streak that would change the complexion of the race. That throw was described as he made a complete turn like a discus heaver and threw a strike to Wes Westrom to get the out. So I guess that's my answer, and that's my additional comment as well.
Thanks, Mark. I'm a bit older, but I didn't see him play in New York. But the Bobby Tolan catch to me was, you know.
Yeah, I don't think that's
a
a wrong answer. I think that's a perfectly good answer.
Yeah, that was on television back here in New York, so I was grateful to see that. And Duke, for those of you who don't know, Scott Petoniak is a writer. He wrote the Antonelli book, and he's also contributes to the Hall of Fame magazine. He is writing a article about Monte Irvin, the 50th anniversary of his election to the Hall of Fame. Duke, do you think it took too long to get into the Hall, Monte Irvin?
Well, you know, I mean, it's a hard question to answer definitively. I mean, what took too long was for players from Black baseball to even be considered for the Hall of Fame. Once they got considered, there are some people who think Monte got in before some of the other greats. I've heard people say that Rube Foster, who's kind of the father of Black baseball, should have gotten in long before Monte. So I guess my answer would be, I wish they had been recognizing Black baseball sooner. I think Ted Williams really pushed that forward, saying that Black ball players from the Negro Leagues should be recognized by the Hall of Fame in 1966. And then it was still several years after that. So it's a hard thing to answer definitively. I'm glad at least that, given how long a life that Monte Irvin lived, he got to savor it and appreciate it for a very long time.
Secondly, were you invited to the celebration of life and also the statue dedication for Irvin?
No, I have met Monte's daughter, Pat, but I didn't know them well. And I really wasn't at that point when the statue was put up. I don't think that I had yet started on studying.
Just to keep in your back pocket, I was invited to both. I have the programs for both. If
cool.
you ever want to see them or look at them.
I would love to see them.
Wonderful. Steve Rothschild, you are up.
Yes, I'm going to use a couple of minutes. I have a couple of comments. This is a boost for Gary. You mentioned the song Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. Gary was able to get the singer on a Zoom call here a while back, Terry Cashman, who actually grew up in my neighborhood. His real name is Dennis Minogue. You left one thing out, and I'm surprised. Maybe you had it in your research and just didn't bother putting it in. Mays and Irvin owned a liquor store in Brooklyn called MONTE. It didn't last very long. And I remember on the one or two times that I called Monty Irvin and I asked him that question, I says, what the heck happened? And he more or less said, we didn't know what we were doing and we were in the wrong neighborhood. I guess you probably knew that, right?
It's in the article, and I, for whatever reason, didn't bring that up.
I don't know how many of the other people here
Yeah,
knew
so
that they owned the liquor store.
Wilmot Liquors
Brooklyn.
together, and it was in Brooklyn, I'm
It was
thinking.
in Brooklyn, yeah.
And they wanted to get to Manhattan. And believe it or not, somebody named Howard Cosell was involved in this whole story when Howard Cosell was at least portraying himself as a lawyer, and Howard Cosell was supposedly advising them how they could get the license to move to Manhattan, and it never happened. So that Willie and Monty had to close this liquor store within about a year.
Yes.
And according to Mark Grabowski, who wrote the Howard Cosell biography, he said that Monty told him Howard was the only person Monty ever said was a terrible person. You know, I like everybody except Howard Cosell. So,
I understand. The other thing is,
understand.
it's ironic that Jeffrey Rhodes is here. Dusty, at least in games 1 and 2 in 54 series, he pinch hit for Monty Irvin, which was, you know, I guess at the time hard to understand, but of course he came through each time. The other thing is we talked about Mays' speed. A lot of times Mays would hit triples and the broadcasters would say, the only person who could have caught that was the one who hit it in Mays' behalf. And then in the song, The Catch, which Cashman also sang, and I'm sure this is true, Monty was quoted as saying, once Willie pounded the glove, we knew he'd catch it. That was a trademark. Whenever Mays would pound his glove, he would catch the ball. And if you look at the catch, look at it in slow motion. You guys can all see it on YouTube. You see him pounding his glove. And of course, he caught the ball. And the last point, which is, I don't think you've heard, Mays was out here during the Cactus League luncheon some years back in 2017, when they inducted all the founding father blacks, Dobie, Irvin, Mays, and Banks. Mays, the only one alive, kind of represented him and spoke about each one. And he talked about his first encounter with Ernie Banks. Ernie Banks came over to Willie Mays and said, I'm not sure you know me. I'm Ernie Banks. And Mays said to him, I know you. You're the guy that said, let's play 2. Let's play 1. We're going to kick your ass. Okay, great presentations, both of them.
Thank you, Steve. Bill Klink.
On mute. I usually don't, and I fumble on that. I didn't fumble that one. I got it on the first hop. And you guys got it on the first hop, Mark. And you've done both of you, Duke, you did a wonderful job on this. I am led. I have not bought the book. I will buy the book. It sounds wonderful. A question, you know, you brought up Philadelphia and is playing early on in Philly. And it had a reputation for not being very friendly towards blacks. Obviously, we had Jones and Semenek and you know, others on that team, Granny Hamner, all from the South. He went through a difficult time at Memorial Stadium in Hagerstown when he broke in. And I wondered if you guys ever got much of a sense if when he did it early on in Philly, whether he went through either hard times from the Philly players, some of the Southerners, or from the fans, and Philly fans want to, you know, give anybody a hard time. I don't know if you'd gotten any sense of that. John I. Kennedy, I think, had a really hard time when he broke in '57 and became the first black for the Phillies in the last of the National League. They gave him a hard time. The team gave him a hard time on that. The manager, Mayo Smith, covered it for him. Any sense of any of that early on in 51 in Philly from the fans or the players?
So I guess my comment on that would be, first of all, let's remember that the Giants of 51 had quite a number of Southern white players. And that in itself doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a problem, because from everything that I've heard, the race situation on the Giants that year was really quite good. And Monte said, especially it became good once Willie came to the team. Philadelphia was, of course, now 4 years removed from that horrible incident with Jackie Robinson and Ben Chapman. Ben Chapman, you know, you probably all know about this, but Ben Chapman, as the manager of the Phillies in 47, yelled out the most vile racist stuff at Jackie Robinson, and it turned into a whole big contretemps. And in fact, the owner of the Philadelphia team, was the owner or the general manager,
Carpenter?
Herb Pennock, had and it's in the movie 42 that he basically said to Branch Rickey, "You can't bring Jackie." So yeah, Philadelphia had that reputation. Some people called it the northernmost southern city in the country. I have not read anything about, you know, of course it was just a series at that beginning of the season. So I have not read anything about it being particularly problematic for Willie Mays. I do remember reading that Monte had a collision at home plate once with Andy Semenuk, but I don't remember that turning into any kind of a fight. So I don't know specifically that there was animosity related to Philadelphia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Goldfarb.
Thank you both gentlemen for your presentation. Just a comment on Mark. Mark, keep providing that data to Dave Fleming. It makes those broadcasts on KNBR terrific. So thank you. Thank you for that. Duke, was it true that, if I remember, it could be from the Zoom meetings or something that I read, that Monte Irvin was contacted by Branch Rickey, and he could have been the first Black player in Major League Baseball. And he had just come out of the service and wasn't, he said he really wasn't ready for the spotlight or whatever explanation he gave. And then Rickey turned to Jackie Robinson.
So as it happens, I was just in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress researching the Branch Rickey papers to look into this further. So the first thing I would say is there is no doubt that Jackie was the first to be signed and that Monte was not approached before Jackie, because Jackie was signed in August. Monte was still in transit. I don't know if he was actually in state. He might have been on, because he spent some time on a Navy hospital boat when he came back in 45. He had an inner ear problem and had what today we would probably call PTSD. So he was not even available to talk to Branch Rickey when Jackie was first signed. But of course, they didn't announce Jackie signing until October. So the story that Monte consistently told all throughout his life was that he was in fact approached by Branch Rickey and the Dodgers before Monte went to play in the Puerto Rican Winter League season, which happened in late October of 1945. I wanted to look at Branch Rickey papers to see if there were any mentions of this, and there were none. Okay, so there's nothing, at least at this point, out there that will memorialize that happening. Having said that, I do think it happened because Monte played on an Negro League All-Star team playing the Dodgers around October 12th. I think it was October 7th to 12th, 1945, and played very well. And this was the same time that Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb, and I think one or two other African-American players were approached by the Dodgers. So it makes total sense that Monte was approached at the same time. Unlike those other players, Monte did not sign. Monte said, "I'm not ready." So the other players, we found out about it when they put pen to paper and they signed. I also found out, by the way, the Dodgers were hoping not to announce the Jackie Robinson signing until as late as January 1946. they were under pressure. There was a lot of stuff going on in New York at the time. And they felt that they had to announce Jackie earlier than they wanted to. They really wanted to sign several players at once. So from what I can tell, Monte was one of those early people they were talking about. And had Monte not said to them, you know, I'm not ready, he probably would have been one of a group of 4 or 5 people. By the way, Branch Rickey also said it's very possible that some of these other players are better than Jackie Robinson. So, you know, and I'm sure many of you know, Jackie had only played about 30 games in the Negro Leagues at that point. They had no way of knowing Jackie was going to be near as good as he was. Monte was a much bigger star in the Negro Leagues. More recent data that's being put together by Seamhead says that Monte won 3 successive Negro League batting championships. It's been reported that Monte was the Negro League star, that the owners of the Negro Leagues, F. Manley, the owner of the Eagles, said this many years later. The owners of the Negro Leagues thought Monte would be the best player to integrate baseball. So one other thing I did find, Branch Rickey was quoted in early 1946 by sports writer, well-known Black sports writer, Sam Lacey, who was saying, I know Monte Irvin very well. I've been watching him. He's a really good ball player. So I don't have any doubt Branch Rickey had Monte Irvin on his radar screen, but it didn't play out that way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Mars, you are up.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was very informative. I have a comment and a question. I'm in no way going to compare myself for being shut out of the documentary like Monte Irvin was, but was he ill at the time? What was the year he died? And when did they start production of that documentary?
So Monte Irvin died in 2016. The documentary, I think, was done during the pandemic, mostly.
Yeah. Well, what happened there? I would be shocked, like you were saying. He was so instrumental in Mays' career that he wasn't asked to be in the documentary. Now, I was in it, and I didn't make the final cut. But of course, I'm not going to compare myself with the relevance of Monte Irvin. But you know, the thing, what I would say that I would have liked to seen more fans in the documentary that saw him play. Well, I was one of them, but I would have liked to have seen more fans interviewed that had eyewitnesses accounts of him. So one story I related to Nelson George when I was interviewed was that when I went to the last game of the last Dodger game on my 10th birthday in 1957, Mays hit 2 triples and made a great catch off of Duke Snyder. So there I was. I was an eyewitness to that, but there were no fans that made the final cut. The other thing I wanted to ask you, which was always a huge curiosity, after what happened to Mays with the racism in San Francisco, did you ever hear of anything where Mays actually wanted to return to New York, especially when the Mets were inaugurated?
I haven't looked at Mays' career with anywhere near the depth that I have Monte Irvin's career. So I don't have, I've read some things that Mays kind of went back and forth at different times about where he wanted to live. You know, he did finally get a house that he wanted in San Francisco. And I think, you know, over time, the San Francisco fans became much warmer towards him than they were perhaps in '58. The Giants, as I know it, traded him, not really because he wanted to be traded, but because Horace Stoneham couldn't pay him anymore and wasn't able to pay him in a personal services contract after Willie's career. And Joan Payson, being the Mets owner, who was, you know, a lifelong Giants fan and loved Willie Mays, she really wanted Willie Mays, and that's why I think it happened in 1973.
Was Joan Payson? Well, did Joan Payson make any sort of movement to try to get Mays in 1962? I guess you might not have heard any news on that.
You know, I I guess I would only speculate here, whether she made a move or not would have been immaterial. Willie Mays was Willie Mays. There's no way in 1962 they were gonna, give up Willie Mays for anything.
Thank you, Mark.
Paul, you're up, Paul. Unmute, Paul.
Got it. Yeah, thank you, folks. Thank you guys very much for a wonderful presentation. I want to tell Duke just a shout out from another Giants and Red Sox fan from Western Massachusetts. I grew up in Pittsfield, so my roots go back. I remember seeing Bobby Bonds playing Double-A baseball when the Pittsfield had the Red Sox, and then the Rangers, the Cubs, the Mets, and Single-A. And Bobby was with the Springfield Giants at the time. So my relationship with the Giants goes way back. But my question really is for Mark. Mark, that picture of Mays making the catch against Eddie Matthews, where was that? What stadium?
I think that was in whatever Milwaukee's home park was in '59.
County Stadium.
Yep. Okay.
County Stadium.
Okay. Neat.
There's
Okay.
something that's really cool that you can do, just if you're looking for something to do for fun related to Willie Mays, is go to apimages.com or gettyimages.com and just type in Willie Mays and then whatever subject suits your fancy, and you'll get dozens and dozens of photos from the 50s, the 60s, all the way up to now, even like Willie Mays at movie premieres. There's all sorts of good stuff there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Manis, you're up.
Yeah, hi. Excellent presentation by Mark and Duke. Mark, I've always loved Willie's home runs as a kid, but I was fascinated by the basket catches. And I saw Willie play a lot against the Mets at the Polo Grounds and at Shea, and I just loved those catches. So the day after I turned 13, the day after my bar mitzvah, and I counted the money in the savings bonds, my father presented me with a Willie Mays glove so I can go out and practice the basket catches. And I tried and I could never master it, but I have the glove, if you could see it. Still have it. It's falling apart. It's now 57 years old.
Wow.
It has the facsimile of his autograph in there. I used it and I tried with Spaldings, with softballs, with hardballs. I just could not catch the damn ball. I caught it regularly though. I was able to do that. And when my son was in Little League, I let him play with the remains of this glove. It's now ready for Cooperstown, I guess. But it reminds me of my father, who's now deceased. And this glove served me well playing up at summer camp and during the New York City teacher strikes of the late 60s. And I still have it. I'll die with it, probably put it in my casket.
That's
So-
really cool. The thing that I found about the basket catch was that there were a couple of different origin stories for it, where like some people said that he learned it, I think, in Trenton. Some people said that he learned it from Bill Rigney. Some people said that he learned it from Chick Genovese. That it was around a certain point in time, but it's hard to pinpoint like who taught him how to make that play.
Well, that was his trademark, as we
Yep.
know.
Thank you, Howard.
Thanks.
There's one authority in here who could comment on that. I see Dan Taylor shaking his head. Dan, you want to give a little basket catch info?
George Genovese told me on many occasions his brother Chick was an outstanding center fielder in the Red Sox organization. And when he managed Willie at Trenton, he taught Willie the basket catch.
Nice. That's cool. I had seen that in a few sources, and then there was a couple of things that referenced Bill Rigney, but that's good that you have direct corroboration of that.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Howard. Mr. Weinberg.
Mark, Duke, I could listen to you guys all night. It was a wonderful presentation. That said, Mark, you kept saying Willie appeared on April 25th, 1951. You sure that date?
May.
I think that's a Duke thing.
Duke, that's a Duke thing. I'm sorry.
May 25th.
Yeah, May 25th. Okay, we got that straight. And Duke, where I'm trying to find you on my screen. Oh, there you are. Duke, I'm not a room raider. Is that a foul pole next to you?
No, that's my, it's distorted. It's the bookcase that I'm.
No, that yellow thing that's perpendicular. It looks like a foul pole. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That thing.
That's the
I
back
thought
of
it was
a
a baseball
bookcase.
bat.
No, it's a bookcase.
Okay.
This is a room with all baseball books. I have over 2,000 baseball books.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it would be good. You think about putting a foul pole in there.
Oh, well, it would be fun.
RV, you live in New York. Warner Wolf called it the fair pole. Remember that.
Yeah.
That's the pesky pole, right? I mean, you're from Massachusetts, pesky pole.
Go ahead, Harv.
Yeah, we got 3 different names. For the both of you, we here in our group have refined the discussion of Willie Mays. Leo famously said he had 5 tools. We're up to 7. 6th being an IQ, a masterful IQ of baseball, and Norm added a 7th, a charisma. What do you guys think of the 5, 6, 7 tool player that Willie was?
He had more tools than Tim the Tool Man.
I like the IQ one, the brain.
I had pushed that up for the longest time, but I'm with Norm. He had 7. Willie had 7. And for what it's worth, I saw my first game July 10th, 1954. I was 8, and Willie was in center field. Monte was in left field. We were sitting in right field. That was Don Mueller. So I actually have a somewhat of a memory. I have a wonderful memory of what Willie did that day. Made a great catch, whirled around, threw a runner out at home plate, stole home, even though the official box score said he scored on an error by the pitcher. My father scored it as a stolen base. It was a stolen base. I don't care what anybody says. But anyway, thank you very much for joining our discussion. You guys are good.
Thank you.
Anybody else who
Thank
did
you.
not ask a question?
One quick one, Gary. I went
Yes.
and looked up Monte Irvin in the Macmillan's encyclopedia for some of the stats, and I know they are limited. And I'm not going to go over the stats, but they mentioned something about him, and maybe one of you 2 guys can shed light on this. It says that he also played under the name Jimmy Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
What about that?
Yeah, he played under the name Jimmy Nelson in 1937 or 38, because he was trying to maintain his amateur status, because he was at that point going to or planning on going to Lincoln University, which was a historically Black institution, although he also was interested in going to University of Michigan and didn't get the opportunity. So that's why he played under the name Jimmy Nelson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we wrap it up with the great Norm Coleman?
You guys were great, but I do want to just elaborate on this number 7th tool, charisma. And Duke, you pretty much said it, but not in those words. He came to New York in 1951. The team was not completely all together, and Willie Mays's charisma was part of what put that team together. And that's what he did his entire career. That's why that's the 7th tool.
I couldn't agree more, and that's what I heard Monte always said consistently.
Gentlemen, again, here's the new book that you contributed to. Best way to get it is through Sabre or Amazon, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. One parting thing. Duke, when is your book projected to be released?
I think it's still going to take me another 2 to 3 years to get the book out. There's so much to write. He lived, till he was almost 97, and he did stuff all throughout his career. So look for it in 2025 to 26.
And you have a place to talk about it with this group.
Thank you.
Guys and gals, let's give it up for Duke and Mark. Hopefully, I hope you all enjoyed this month we put together for Mays.
Yes.
Let's all
Thank
live and
you,
be well
Gary.
and do it again next May 2024. That's a good number, 2024. Anyway, I will hang around here, talk some Giant baseball if you want. We will regroup in 2 weeks with Dennis Christensen A lot of you wanted to have more information on Les Kiter, and Dennis collaborated with Les in 1990 something on his biography. So we will meet in 2 weeks. I believe that is June 1st. I don't like to say Happy Memorial Day, but observe the holiday and thank
Agree.
people who you know.
Thank you,
are no longer
Gary.
with us.
Great.
Have a
session.
great guys
Thank you,
again.
Gary,
Duke
and
and
all of
Mark,
you.
fabulous.
Thank
And
you.
We will see you guys another time. Have a great
Have a
night.
good night.
Have a good
Thanks,
night.
fellas.
Oh,